It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
And I guess we can talk about the defensive line now. Is that cool, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, by all means.
Yeah, so basically, like, they put in their Cinco front on Friday, and it was just like, that's their five defensive line front.
Yep.
So it's like
the four first rounders and Big Phil is like the number one version of that, right?
Yeah, and it was crazy. So like basically, it's let me think if I can remember who it was. It was Sweat, Payne, Big Phil, John Allen, and then Chase Young, left to right. And it was just like the offense, and they were bringing pressures and doing exotic stuff. And the offensive line, basically, like every play of that series, like, I'm probably being a little hyperbolic, someone lost a one-on-one, Someone lost a one-on-one.
Which, as a reminder, is why you do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have 5 down linemen, then your protection call is pretty easy. Each of your 5 offensive linemen gets one of those D linemen, and you can't double team anywhere unless you want to keep a tight end or a back end.
Yeah, and you can work slides, and there's ways around it, but it's tough. It gets you out of what you want to be doing in terms of getting eligibles out, like we've talked about before. And it was just crazy. And it wasn't just like straight rushes. It was like they were running ETs, like where the end is picking for the tackle, and then TEs where the tackle's picking for the end. And they were running like natural stunts where, the 3 technique gets high and the end comes underneath. And it was just like tough, man. Because I actually think like Charles Leno has done a really, really nice job on Chase this camp of like, it's probably like 50-50 or 60-40 in favor of Leno. But it's like every day Leno's pulling something out of his bag. It's like, hey, I got Chase, I got a jump set this, I got a B set, I got a vertical to a jump. And it's just like you can see a veteran football player cultivating a plan for a young rusher. And Chase has done a good job of kind of meeting him and forcing him to do that stuff, which is great. But on this Cinco day, they just basically ran so many TEs, and Sadiq Charles had such a hard time like kind of passing that, because like on a stunt, right, the guard needs to be super aggressive, kind of punch the stunt flat so the tackle can overtake it, and then the guard can pass off to the defensive end who's coming around the other way, right? And they couldn't get it blocked, and it was tough. It's tough sledding because you got a really experienced guy in Leno who I think is again, I think he's had a really good camp, and I think Sadiq, to his credit, had a rough probably first 2 days, and then I thought you saw something kind of spark in him, right? You saw him kind of develop a plan. So both those guys, I think, over the last 2 days have definitely improved, and I think Leno's had a solid 4 days, but like, it's just that group is so good on the other side that it's really challenging. Same thing with Wiley, right? Wiley and Montez, like, they're going to blows, and you can tell Montez has come out with some different pass rush stuff, and Wiley, they don't have pads on, obviously, so it's tough, but it's like, that's a tough matchup, and Wiley's had to jump and do some different stuff, and Montez has met that and done a good job. And then Big Phil, I had a nice rush. I think that's the thing I forget about Big Phil, is that like he is a big man. Obviously, you don't get a nickname like Big Phil not being a big dude, but he has a little bit of pass rush juice to him. So he hits Nick Gates with like a stutter, like wiper basically, and ends up getting the pressure. And I was like, as much as I love Ridgeway, and Ridgeway's elite at stopping the run, you don't get that same pass rush juice, And so then you get F.A. Obata, who's been rushing from the 3 technique, and that group's just awesome. So really outstanding job in those passing, the team pass, team blitz situations. I will say the offense had a team run period the other day and absolutely gutted that defense. So like, obviously, like, there's a little bit of, like, nobody's perfect, right? Mm-hmm. And I think
which is kind of what you want.
Yeah. But and they ran some kind of pin pull stuff, and you could tell that the defense hadn't been working fits too much. There were some open gaps, led to big plays, and I'd say they probably had 3 or 4 what I would characterize as explosive runs. And it's hard to tell in practice because you don't know if that arm tackle pulls the back down or whatever. But it was a pretty impressive day from a run standpoint. But the pass stuff, and again, I think that speaks to some of the issues that Sam. Again, I think Sam has been pretty sharp, like some of the issues we talked about, right? But I think overall, that's a tough group to work against because there's a lot of stuff in your face, there's a lot of color, and it just makes it really challenging. So
for sure, it's funny you say the arm tackle thing, and I just have all these visions of Duran and John making arm tackles last year, where like you have a 230-pound back who hits the hole, and John just like does a bicep curl in space, and it's just like the guy's dead. Like how did you do that, John Allen? And by the way, you just mentioned so many guys who were playing so well. You didn't even mention John Allen, which is like that shows you the depth. who's
And
I'm sure having a great camp because he's John Allen.
And he's probably been, I don't know, like the most consistent in terms of wins,
Sure.
Like he's awesome.
He's John Allen.
He's John Allen. And I think he's got some new stuff in the bag that looks really cool for him. And again, poor Sadiq, man, like that's a tough day at the office. And, Chris Paul's been getting some rotation in there as kind of that Cosme and for Sadiq. So it's not just like Sadiq, and he's done a nice job too. So
yeah, I want to go through the O-line in a second. But let me ask you this first real quick before we get into like the individuals of the O-line.
Yeah.
A lot of our confidence that this offense is going to be all right is on Bieniemy as a play caller and his ability to insulate Sam and the O-line. So how much of that is actually even at play at this point in camp? Because they have run, some of this is like the jet sweeps and things like that, the motions to keep teams off balance. I don't feel like they've used as much of that. It's in the offense. They've used it some, and just, again, we have to be a little bit general here. But how much of this is the fact that you're dealing with kind of still a scaled down version of the playbook versus and like scaled down periods that you're not setting up plays in the first quarter that you're going to, hit in the third kind of thing. Like how much is play calling even a factor at this point in training camp?
Oh, it's basically like none. It's not. There's no game plan. Like it's just like, and that's part of the thing that's tough about it. It's like
you run a play, then you run another one, and they're not connected. Other than just like it's the next play on the list to run.
And you probably coach the concept versus the defense you're expecting to a certain extent, but it's like versus our team. Like if I was game planning for them, like based on what San Francisco did last year, like I'd get into some heavier personnel groups to throw the football because you're going to get Cinco as the response to stop the run, which makes a lot of sense, right? You run a lot of play pass, you run a lot of max pro, you create a lot of space, you stress the linebackers out, and that's what Kansas City likes to do too, right? When they played Denver last year, they ran like a lot of heavier personnels, like multiple tight ends, fullbacks, because it elicited a specific response. And so there's none of that going on. There's no like chip help. There's no like anything. It's like, hey, it's day 2 install. We're running this. And I think we've talked about this before. Like sometimes you just get a bad install crossover. Like I think you want the coordinators to communicate so they're kind of ready. But sometimes like we got Cinco in and we're doing our 6-man pro and we're going to bring some like 6 and 7-man protect like blitzes and stuff. Like that's a bad day. You know what I mean? Because you just don't have the stuff. And the fact that you can't run the football, I think is also, you can run the football, but that's not a priority of the offense, in the same way that it's been in years past. And I think they will run the football. I think that's going to be something they do, but they just, in the way the practice is structured, and it makes sense. Like, why are we going to run the football and no pads?
Right.
Like it doesn't.
You can't practice the blocking the way it needs to be practiced.
Right. And so that makes sense. So like when all that stuff kind of gets folded back in, the keepers get a little bit better. There's more pull on some of the fakes because you can hand the ball off to those guys because they're handing the runs off. I think it just gets a lot better. You know what I mean? It's just going to get a lot better. So if you're asking me if I'm concerned, I know a lot of people have asked me, like, no, like I'm not really concerned yet. Like, I think, like I said, there's a lot of time. There's a lot of game planning still left to go. And I think that group's going to be elevated by that. So it's like Wiley's a pro. He'll figure it out, especially with EB kind of once EB's game planning, right? Leno, I think, has looked good. Gates has looked good. Cosme has flashed some really, really nice stuff. But again, he's moved to a new position, so there's some lumps there. Sadiq's the guy that I think has had probably the toughest run of 4 days. But again, he goes against the best player in the defense every day. So it's like, that's tough. So I think ultimately, like, as the game planning gets better, like I said, in the team run period, it was like, this looked like, the Hogs. Like it's kind of goes ebbs and flows. The defense isn't repped out a ton. I know the offense has been doing like offensive run walkthrough. So they were really ready to go for those looks. And, they won the period, I would say. But yeah, and that's a good thing, because when that all blends together, that means the offense is going to be a little bit more well-rounded. The defense can't tee off as much, all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. So, all right, let's quickly run through the offensive line personnel and just how are we doing, any red flags. Because I was trying to think also to training camp last year, and like people were starting to wave the red flag a little
Yeah.
bit on Carson, and it was like, hey, eventually this is going to get better, right? Turns
Yeah.
out the answer was no. But I don't think that there's any red flags this time of year for anybody, nevertheless, the quarterback or any of the guys we're about to talk about. But let's
Right.
run through it. Leno, you think's had a good camp.
I think he's been good. You know, that doesn't mean he wins every rep, but I think
Sure.
he's looked good. You know, and I think Sadiq again. I say the last day and a half has looked better, but
Yep.
he's
Improvement is what you're looking for.
and he's a guy that again is one of those players that's a little up and down. You know, like some days he's really good, some days he's not good, and that consistency kind of varies between reps. So again, for a guy who is going into year 4, like I think it's a big year for him. I think he's physically capable of doing it, but it's like, how does he develop is the question. So
Yeah. What about Chris Paul?
I think Chris Paul's looked good. You know, I think he's looked really good. He's looked like he's matured a little bit. He's more confident. He's running faster. Like last year, I felt like there was like a little bit of a hitch. And, you know, when you talk to guys on the team and when you watch him play, he has extremely strong hands. So some of the stuff that John does to Sadiq, he cannot do to Chris, because Chris is just throwing out these meat cleavers that just seem to kind of just, I don't know, just be like magnets for human bodies. Like it's crazy how strong he is. So, obviously,
Do you think he can push Sadiq for the starting job?
I do.
Is that still on the table?
I do think that.
Okay.
I think that's the more I watch him, the more I think that's a real thing, because I think he's developed a lot. I think he's in better shape. Again, the strength, the confidence seems to be better. I think that's definitely something. And I think they're kind of even right now. You know, at least in my mind, I think Sadiq probably gets the nod because he's got a little bit more experience. And I think he's a little bit better of an athlete. But I think that's something that by week 2 or 3 of training camp, if they're splitting reps, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, you know what I mean? So
yeah, that could be a Baltimore practice story for sure.
Sure,
the joint
yeah.
practice one.
Yeah.
All right, center Gates, how's he doing?
I think Gates has done a great job. I mean, there's a lot on his plate in terms of getting stuff called, protections and runs. I feel like he's done a good job. He's physical. I think he had a loss to Big Phil the other day. Like, you know, that happens. It's pads, whatever, no pads on. But I think he looks settled in. Like I said, I think, you know, just kind of moving down the line. Cosme, again, athletically, he flashes. Like I think he's learning the physicality of guard, which is another reason why you're always like, can a tackle move to guard? Because it's just a different physical beast.
Right, you're playing in a phone booth.
Yeah, and then I think Wiley, like in the team run period, both him and Wiley, Cosme and Wiley, like you see what makes them kind of special is that they can move their feet really well and they can get guys covered up. And I'd say they were one of the big reasons why the run period went so well, is because they can get guys covered up, they can move well, their double teams are violent and physical, they can get guys out of there. So you know, obviously he's going against Montez, and I think Montez right now is the best edge pass rusher on the edge, and so that's a tough day every single day. And like I said, I think Montez has added some stuff to the bag. So you know, again, that's something I'm watching, but I think he's a pro. I think EB knows how to use him. I think he's got some stuff to kind of help him mature as a pass protector. Is he going to be the best right tackle in football? No. But is he going to be fine? I think fine is what you're looking for on offensive line. So,
and then rookie check, Stromberg, Daniels.
Stromberg, I think, has looked pretty good. You know, like so I'll say this. The second offensive line, which is Cornelius, number 60, who's the XFL guy playing guard, Stromberg, and left guard is Chris Paul. Left tackle is Foster, I believe, number 73. That group has played well the last 2 days. They've done a really nice job. So, God, what is the guy's name? 60. He's actually been a pleasant surprise. He's a converted tackle playing guard. He's a big man, good and pro.
Which number you say is?
Number 60.
You got Jared Jones-Smith is wearing 60.
So he's actually I've been impressed with him. Like he was a guy that I thought, no way he makes the team during rookie minicamp. And then now I'm like, you know, maybe there's a good rotational guard piece there, or a practice squad guy, you know? So that's someone to keep an eye on in terms of the last couple of days. Daniels is interesting because he's going against like the threes, and some of those technical deficiencies still show up. You know, he's a very raw kind of developmental guy. He flashes occasionally, but I'd say most of his work is, you know, he's got to work on some stuff, and we'll see how that goes over the next couple of weeks. Because that's what you see in training camp, right? You see like some young guys step up and they improve a lot, and some guys just kind of stay the same and they're on practice squad. And I think that's kind of what you're looking at with him.
Yeah, he's going to be a borderline guy, and you know, for a fourth rounder, you'd like to have a guy safely is going to make the roster, but
Sure.
we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do
He's
it.
Very, very smart.